She was on television almost every day. Ministry Now. Joni Table Talk, the face of Daystar Television Network, composed, present, professional, and the entire time, she was fighting something she had chosen not to tell anyone about. Not her viewers, not her audience of millions. She kept it private, she kept showing up, she kept broadcasting until April 2026, when a back injury made it impossible to continue. And when people went back and watched her final broadcast after her death was announced, they saw something they hadn't noticed in real time. The signs had been there. This is the story of what Joni Lamb was carrying, privately, quietly, while the cameras were still rolling. Joni Lamb co-founded Daystar Television Network in 1993, alongside her husband Marcus. For over 3 decades, she was its public face, not just its executive, its on-air presence. She hosted, she interviewed, she appeared on screen regularly in programs that reached a global audience. That level of sustained public presence requires something most people underestimate. Not just talent or charisma, but discipline. The ability to separate what is happening in your private life from what you present on camera. Joni Lamb did that for decades. After Marcus Lamb's sudden death in November 2021, she continued. She remarried. She kept building the network. She kept broadcasting. And at some point, a point that has not been publicly specified in precise medical detail, she began dealing with what her husband Doug Weiss later described as serious private health challenges. She chose to handle them privately. She chose to keep working. She was 65 years old, and she was not ready to stop. The details of Joni Lamb's underlying health condition have not been fully disclosed publicly. What Doug Weiss confirmed after her death is she had been quietly dealing with serious health challenges prior to her final week. His characterization was that she chose to face them directly and privately. That was her decision. Her choice about how to manage her own medical situation, that choice is worth taking seriously rather than. There are many reasons a public figure, particularly one whose identity, ministry, and institutional role are deeply intertwined, might choose privacy around illness. Some of those reasons are personal, some are institutional, some are simply about maintaining normalcy in the face of something frightening. Whatever Joni Lamb's specific reasons, the pattern is documented. She knew. She continued. She kept the cameras rolling. And then in April 2026, she suffered a severe back injury. That injury forced her to step away from her daily broadcast. From Ministry Now, from Joni Table Talk. The on-air presence she had maintained through everything. Daystar's leadership later explained that the back injury did not occur in isolation. It landed on top of existing undisclosed health conditions. The combination, a sudden acute injury compounding chronic underlying illness, created what they described as a rapid medical deterioration that proved fatal despite aggressive intervention from her medical team. She died on May 7th, 2026. 11 days ago. After Joni Lamb's death was announced, something predictable happened in the age of social media. People went back and watched her final broadcasts. What they noticed, now that they were looking with the knowledge of what had happened, were physical changes that had not registered consciously in real time. Viewers and commentators noted visible swelling in her face in those final appearances. Change from her normal on-air appearance that, in retrospect, suggested her body was under strain. They also noted changes in her speech, a quality that some described as slightly strained or unclear, different from her usual delivery. Now, here is where responsible storytelling requires care. Retrospective observation of physical changes in a public figure's final appearances is not medical diagnosis. Facial swelling and speech changes can be caused by an enormous range of conditions, medication side effects, treatment responses, the physical toll of chronic illness, or combinations of factors that only her medical team would. What those observations do tell us, accurately, is that something was happening, that her body was carrying something visible, that the private battle she had chosen to keep off camera was at some point becoming impossible to fully conceal, and that she kept showing up anyway. That detail, keeping her broadcasts going while visibly unwell, while carrying something her audience did not know about, is the human center of this particular story. There is a specific kind of person who does what Joni Lamb did in those final months. Who wakes up with a body that is fighting something serious? Who gets dressed? Who sits in a television studio? Who looks into a camera and ministers to an audience of millions as though the weight behind the eyes is not there? We tend to call that strength. Sometimes we call it denial. Sometimes, depending on the circumstances, we call it something more complicated. In Joni Lamb's case, her daughter Rachel offered a frame for understanding it. Rachel described her mother asking her doctor about their eternal destination in the moments before a final medical procedure. She said her mother's calling was always bigger than any of the pain she was feeling. Whether you read that as inspiring or heartbreaking, or both, it describes a woman whose sense of purpose was so strong that it functioned as a kind of armor against her local reality. She was not just doing a job, She was, by her own understanding and by her daughter's account, fulfilling a calling. And callings, for people who hold them that deeply, do not yield easily to illness. Doug Weiss confirmed she faced her health challenges head-on, that she chose to handle them in private. That was not passive avoidance. It was an active decision about how she wanted to live the time she had. Here's the part of the story that sits heaviest. Joni Lamb was broadcasting to millions of people who trusted her, who found comfort in her presence, who tuned in regularly and felt in some way that she was a stable and consistent part of their spiritual lives. And she was sick, in ways they did not know, in ways she had chosen not to share. There is something both generous and isolating about that. Generous, because she gave her audience a version of herself that was still fully present, still ministering, still showing up for them, even when her body was failing. Isolating, because the cost of that choice is carried alone. The gap between what the camera shows and what is actually happening in a person's body, in a person's private life, in the quiet hours when the broadcasts are over, that gap is real. Maintaining it day after day is its own form of exhaustion. Her viewers did not know they were watching someone fight to stay present. Now, going back and watching those final broadcasts, knowing what they know, many of them are experiencing something that grief researchers recognize: the retroactive realization. The moment when you understand that what you thought you were seeing was not the whole picture. She was there, and she was also quietly already leaving. There are questions the public record does not fully answer. The specific nature of Joni Lamb's underlying health condition has not been discussed. Doug Weiss described serious private health challenges, but the diagnosis, the timeline of when it began, and the full medical picture remain private. That privacy is appropriate. It belongs to her family. But it does leave open the question of what she knew and when about the seriousness of what she was facing. Whether her choice to keep broadcasting was made with full knowledge of her prognosis, or whether the rapid deterioration after the back injury surprised everyone, including her. Those are questions only her family and her medical team. The public record does show is the outcome. A woman who was on television regularly until a back injury in April. Dead by May 7, a timeline that from the outside looks sudden, but which her family has confirmed was the end of a longer, quieter battle. Warning signs were there in the final broadcast. Nobody, not her viewers, not most of her colleagues, knew what they were looking at. We watch public figures on screens and we think we know them. We see their faces, their voices, their composure, their consistency. We build a sense of who they are from what they choose to show us. But the screen, the frame. And frames, by definition, leave things out. Joni Lamb chose what her frame contained. She chose to keep her illness outside it. She chose to give her audience her presence, her ministry, her focus, and to keep her private battle exactly that. Private. That was her right. It was her choice. And by her daughter's account, it reflected something true about who she was. A person whose sense of calling ran deeper than her physical circumstances. But it also means that the people who watched her in those final months were seeing something incomplete. Not false. She was genuinely there, genuinely present, but incomplete. The fullness of who she was in those final weeks included something the camera did not show. A woman fighting. Privately, quietly, until she couldn't anymore. Joni Lamb died on May 7th, 2026. She was 65 years old. She showed up until she couldn't. And maybe that is the most honest summary of her life. Let me know what you think.